Chapter 24, To the Stars. "24, to the stars." The doors opened on the same room. The one in the yacht, the one in any video correspondence with her, the same unseeable ceiling, the same fireplace, the same shelves and paintings and high-backed chair. The same hand on the same armrest. The handmaiden ushered them inside. They entered in order of rank: Cook, Cicero, Aurora, Hedwig. Joliet awaited them, tucked into a corner, face wan and eyes fidgety, two fingertips pressed together while hearth flames flickered across her ghastliness. The handmaiden directed them to stand beside her, in a line, and await her munificence's beck. They stood. They waited. The heat oppressed, its filthy mugginess, although outside was so cold. En route, driven by a Lombardless Elmhurst, Hedwig lolled her head along the frigid windowpane and caught atop a cell tower a blue-haired girl with a fluttering cape. And outside the Empress's chamber Cubé had waited on a pillar that might have otherwise propped the bust of some ancient federalist. He flicked his tail back, forth, forth. Cicero and Aurora ignored him. Cook flicked him a thumb sideways, like a Roman emperor. Inside, the Empress read. Her pages turned at sporadic intervals, she sometimes lingered and sometimes skipped ahead. Judith perpetually beheaded hollow ferns above her, the arc of his lifeblood poised to drop but never dropping. One final conversation, Hedwig told herself, one more. The endgame boss of shitty conversations. But she had honed her technique by now. Say as little as possible, nod when questioned, provide the answers expected, depart. On a pedestal rested the sole gem of Centurion DuPage, a medium's flawless crystal sphere. Over a week had passed since Cook removed it from its body, and in that time it had built and built its darkness, a vast swath of black swirling Coriolis under its clear surface. Despair had not overtaken her. This fact registered as interesting in some subdued layer of consciousness. The girl's palas salvaged from the lake disappeared in a day. Did DuPage, trapped in a senseless impotent world, still have hope? Or did the size of her soul gem lend her a greater capacity for despair? Hedwig refrained from delving too deeply into DuPage's mind, but could not shake the uncanny fact that DuPage remained technically alive. The Empress turned a page. Hedwig started to sweat. She cared less now. She remained as still as all the others. She looked ahead. At nothing. The Empress turned a page. She did this on purpose, of course. To waste everyone's time. Hedwig resolved not to let it bother her. But it bothered her, not the wasted time, but the vacant space into which crept, unbidden at this late hour, considerations of Sayakamiki's phantom calamity, the words "millions dead." Once spoken with the immediacy of starving children in Africa, now echoing in this cavernous chamber, and a spasm of thought came that she had deadened all sense inside her. But if things truly got as bad as foretold, she would regret doing nothing, and it amazed her because she had gone so many days without worry, and now all anxiety clenched its fist around her at once and her skin became clammy and ashen despite the wet heat. On the opposite end of the room stood the handmaiden watching what seemed like her in particular, and she must assuredly be able to sense the subtle contortions on Hedwig's face as she imagined some nuclear holocaust brought upon by this stupid, foolish Empress whom Berwin wanted her to trust, this Senator Millicent Dorothea Luce of Eufaula, Alabama, who had formed an army of teenage girls and encircled what other city but Washington, D.C., home of powerful men of a terrestrial plane, diplomats and military command centers, could she do something like that? This Empress? Could she bridge the gap from the magical world to the quotidian and seize the latter's means of self-propulsion? Millions dead. Cubé and Sayakamiki both said it. Why hadn't she taken them seriously until now? The Empress closed her book. She stood. At full height, she did not stretch above her high-backed chair, but around its sides fanned the full luster of her ermine robe. The clothing seemed to grow around her, she expanded into a profusion of regality, patterns of fleur-de-lises down her endless front, which reached and then rolled along the carpet like an unraveling tongue, a diamond-encrusted medallion in the shape of an 8-pointed cross strung from her neck, folds of lace and silk and embroidery, a choking glut of design that sparked an image of the pictures scarified into the flesh of the archon's side, although these did not coalesce into the form of God. It was the Empress of the painting. She proceeded from her chair down a pair of steps from her elevated mezzanine to their area, although divided from them as she occupied the long carpet that bisected the room, and they melted near the fireplace at its side.
We, the word came, swelled, are vivified by the reported progress of our illustrious servants. 12 metropolises subjugated, their puella magi sworn to our noble cause, and any fractures among our ranks tempered with new alloy to form a stronger steel. And though we know thy deeds, we wish now to hear them from thine own lips. Centurion Cook.
Cook went from seemingly sleeping, horse-style, to issuing a prompt bow in response.
Oh, I think I understand. You seek to gauge whether our self-estimation exceeds the mark? An exercise of humility, or do I presume, your munificence? We requested thy report, Centurion.
The Empress's voice betrayed no reproach, only total tonal neutrality.
Oh.
She rose from her bow, although her arm remained folded over her chest.
I interpolated too much. As for my performance? Subpar, heh. Subpar. 2 of my soldiers perished, and 5 of my foe. Despite your munificence's decree to abstain from death? The only among us worthy of praise. I'd have to say Centurion Cicero,
Cicero's eyes flitted from straight ahead to the comparatively languorous form of her colleague.
I will leave it to you to judge who is worthy of praise, your munificence. I simply executed your commandments as my ability allowed. It is true I incurred no casualties on either my or my enemy's side, but at the certain cost of speed. Oh, but you had the unfortunate delay. When you had to return to Chicago to assist Joliet. Don't esteem yourself so poorly, Cicero. I also received as assignment cities with fewer and weaker puella magi,
said Cicero.
Consider what you've conquered, Centurion Cook. Detroit and Philadelphia are no minuscule offerings to lay at the feet of her munificence.
Aurora, who had the most to be humble about, said nothing.
Baltimore though? And against an ambush orchestrated by the incubator himself? I honestly envy your prowess, Cicero. Were it not for my seniority, I imagine you would be our first centurion, Was the incubator not also behind the resistance you met in your last 2 cities, Centurion Cook? Not to mention, your efforts in St. Louis could be considered an extension of our empire's conquest, and ought to be heaped upon the pile of your achievements.
The Empress laughed. The sound was so unexpected that Cicero's head whipped around with a trace of fear as she thought the Empress might be choking or something. But the woman in all her imperial vestments laughed, 3 fingers belatedly pressed to her lips to scrounge a sense of ladylikeliness.
Your munificence. It has been some time since I've heard you laugh.
Even the handmaiden took a stunted step forward until the Empress raised a hand for peace and pressed another to her collar to still herself. Her face returned to benign benevolence and she said, Thou hast proven theselves such humble ladies. Our laughter stems not from derision but unimpeded mirth at those we have so arduously created these long years, like the sculptor Pygmalion to his flawless Galatea. Centurions Cook, Cicero, Joliet, Aurora. Today is a day for rejoicing, and so we implore thee to join us in mirth and laugh.
Laugh.
Cicero, Cook, and the others stared at her.
Laugh,
she commanded.
Ha, ha,
said Cicero.
Ha,
said Cook. Joliet made a chitinous click in her throat, which may have been an attempted laugh or just something she did. Aurora remained silent, and the only person who could summon actual laughter, nervy and nearly shrill as it was Hedgewish. The Empress ceased abruptly, and so did everyone else except Joliet, whose final phonic utterance lay dormant in the crackle of the flames.
Perhaps such mirth is o'er hasty.
The Empress turned sharply on her elongated heel, and her entire outfit revolved semicircular in a delayed accompaniment of her body.
For though the Midwest and much of the South and East can rightfully be said to belong to us, yet many lands remain benighted, and indubitably our challenges only surmount. For now full 7 days have passed since we embarked on this quest to unify all Puella Magi under our governorship, and our many foes have had much time to prepare and organize. Perhaps, even, some of my astute servants have wondered why we have allowed our progress to stagnate. Trust that thy indolence comes for beneficent purpose, for we hath waited unto this exact date for a particular purpose. Do any of thee know today's date? January the 5th,
said everyone together, glad for an easy question.
And what occasions tomorrow, the 6th? What a special event!
Nobody spoke at first. January 6th, some obscure holiday? The Empress's birthday, maybe? Cicero betrayed a microscopic bacterium of discomposure, while Aurora seemed to have resolved herself into a perfect statue. The most movement came from Joliet, whose fingers extended one by her side. She was counting. After 2 full handfuls her eyes illuminated, and she nearly staggered forward out of the space of the centurions and into the space of the Empress, only just barely restrained by the invisible barrier that disconnected them, a frantic flash in her face, her lips and eyes purple.
12th, HKKKK, 12th night. The 12th night, Skaya, after Christmas, the Theophany, the Magi's revelation that Jesus Christ was the incarnation of God.
She wheezed, panted, hissed, stooped over herself, seized her knees as though she had sprinted a long distance, looked up at her mother. Her mother said, "Incorrect." Some phantom force kept Joliet from falling.
Firstly, tonight is 12th night, save by the estimation of certain sects we consider inconsequential, and secondly, 12th night is not the night of the Theophany but the night prior. HKKK, I meant that tonight is 12th night, tomorrow they. Silence.
Joliet fell silent.
Thou hast better to not speak than to speak falsely. It marks a pedant or dilettante who noises at the first mention of a topic they consider their expertise, only to distort basic facts. In either case, theophany or not, the deity of Puella Magi has yet to reveal herself to the Gentiles. Inconsequential, inconsequential.
The Empress turned on her heel, her outfit revolved around her, and she paced toward the opposite end of the room, the topic put entirely from her mind and the interruption utterly obviated.
Tomorrow, January the 6th, is the date the 113th United States Congress reconvenes for the commencement of its second session.
Cicero didn't seem to understand. Cook did, Joliet did all too well, and hooked her hands into claws as she stared at the ground trembling. Aurora was no longer an animate object. The Empress continued, "Some among thee may wonder the purpose of appending such significance to such an event, seemingly so far removed from relevance to our aims. It occurs to us that long have we kept even our closest servants in a state of full or partial ignorance as to the true extent of our project, we have withheld much. But this withholding was not on account of malice or mistrust, nay, there is mistrust none.
At least, there is no mistrust toward our current 4 centurions. We have retained this information under the belief that if we kept it hidden within the sanctity of our own mind, unspoken aloud, we might keep our foremost foe ignorant as to our design. Alas, somehow, the incubator hath either intuited it or else we have betrayed our own person in some subconscious manner, such as via soporific murmurings or a lapse in wariness no longer remembered. Hence, the incubator made an unexpected attempt on the life of Centurion Joliet, only via the equally unexpected level-headedness and leadership exhibited by Administrator Hedgewish did this assassination prove unsuccessful, and since then we have arranged exceptional measures to ensure her safety. And because the incubator comprehends our design, he will have assuredly marshaled a force of his strongest terminatrixes, perhaps in accompaniment with any powerful Puella Magi he can coerce to his goals. His army shall be formidable, although we have already stripped this continent of most strong enough to contest us. Indeed, our intelligence indicates 2 of his most feared specialists, Sepulveda and 405, have perished recently, one even by the hand of our esteemed comrade Hedgewish. Cook hath disposed of our rival Denver, and others too have either fallen or been won to our side, Minneapolis, Seattle, Detroit, Philadelphia, Baltimore. Who of great merit remains? Calgary perhaps, but she is loath to leave her own sector of influence, as are most whom the incubator might desire to stand against us. As for the powerful Puella Magi of other nations, of Europe and China and the Middle East, he cannot so quickly move them in this contemporaneous world of passports and border security, and they are not so quickly moved for a conflict they believe does not concern them. We have taken these assiduous measures to cripple the incubator's counterforce, yet we must consider the force he shall muster to be strong, and must prepare accordingly. Our victory hath not yet been assured, and we know for certain that he retains one loyal subject with whom we will have no choice but to contend, and indeed we will contend with her tomorrow. For tomorrow we shall take the city Washington, which is host to but a single Puella Magi. Yet this Puella Magi is, quite possibly, the strongest in the world.
Tomorrow we shall take the city Washington. Hedgewish knew it was coming to that, but it still felt so surreal. She planned to seize the United States government. She planned to capture the fucking United States Congress and hold the whole fucking country hostage. It couldn't be real. It couldn't be real. It couldn't be, and yet she continued on this track of logistics and schematics, describing the magical girl who lived in Washington.
The incubator has placed this Puella Magi in Washington because he is aware of the danger to his world order if that singular city falls, for there is no city of such geopolitical weight as it across the whole globe. And perhaps the city's significance hath contributed to the power of its denizen, for we have heard tell that one's karmic weight influences their prowess.
She turned on her heel and faced them, her expression somewhat surprised.
Doth thou follow? You wish for us to conquer Washington, but it holds an extremely strong Puella Magi,
said Cicero.
You wish for us to conquer the United States Congress,
said Cook.
You wish for us to conquer the United States,
said Hedgewish. They could walk anywhere. Through any metal detector. Then inside, when they transformed, it would be easy. A coordinated strike. They could capture everyone who mattered in one fell swoop. The president, even. What would the best trained Secret Serviceman do against a magical fucking girl?
Thou follow,
said the Empress,
we are pleased. However powerful this Puella Magi is,
said Cicero,
I swear I shall defeat her and take this city in your name. Our occupation has given us ample opportunity to enter the city and observe her,
said Senator Millicent Dorothea Luce, d'Illinois,
and she is more powerful than thee or thy platoon, Cicero. More powerful, perhaps, than our entire empire. The incubator hath molded this world to his liking over the course of many millennia, so he would not allow it to escape his grasp so easily. However,
She had continued to pace up and down the long carpet that stretched across the room, but now she broke from her rhythm and ascended the steps to the mezzanine.
However, we hath considered long how to strike her down.
She plucked DuPage's soul gem from the pedestal. Although it was large and probably heavy, she hefted it with one hand. Then she looked directly at it.
Administrator Hedgewish, we asked thee once, would it be acceptable in the eyes of God for us to eliminate former Centurion DuPage? Thou said it was just. Didst thou speak the truth?
Everyone looked at her. Some of the Centurions seemed confused. The official story was that DuPage had died in combat and those who had witnessed otherwise had received memory tweaking from Joliet, although, given the reported fallibility of Joliet's ability, Hedgewish had to wonder how well the tweaks stuck. She felt the weight of their bewilderment on the nape of her neck, the weight of an unseen Sayaka Mickey, the weight of every fluffy incubator corpse, enough weight to decapitate.
Thou murmur. Speak with clarity. Would our God consider it just for us to murder Yasmin Isfahani, whose soul we now hold in our hand? I said.
She barely even remembered her previous conversation with the Empress. What had she said? If she had to guess, she had said whatever she thought would end the conversation the quickest, whatever she thought would make the Empress happy. If the Empress asked whether Madoka would consider killing DuPage justified, then Hedgewish probably said yes, thinking the Empress wanted divine justification for whatever deed she did, but with pressurized slush working its way up her veins into her face, she realized the Empress wanted the exact opposite. She wanted DuPage's murder to be unjust. Because she planned to unleash an Archon in Washington, D.C.
Your munificence. You.
She fumbled for words, she fumbled even for a notion of a thing to say. The words just and unjust oscillated in her brain like they were lit by giant signs made of light bulbs, the words spelled in bold uppercase, with all watching her and the heat of the fire at her back. She had no time to weigh the options. The Empress smiled.
Thou told me then she would consider it just. That DuPage had sold her humanity and would be rightfully slain. At first we believed thee, but upon consideration we delved deeper into your heart, and thy hesitation now hath confirmed our suspicions. You lied to us, Administrator Hedgewish. Lied.
Cicero reached for her.
You dared speak malicious falsehood to. Peace, Cicero,
said the Empress.
For Hedgewish's intentions were pure, she sought to spare me the grief of knowing God's wrath. Indeed, perhaps now is the time to reveal this unto thee. Hedgewish is more than a mere administrator. She is one whom I value as highly as any of you, even as much as my handmaiden. I have not revealed to thee her holy power. But as our final victory draws nigh, the time for subterfuge ends. Hedgewish has the ability to know and commune with God herself.
It was all tumbling. Tumbling. The Empress continued, unveiled what until then had been a pseudo-Christian god, Madoka Kaname, the name spoken aloud, her sacrifice detailed, the core events of her life and ascension related, the testament of Millicent, albeit a secondary source. Hedgewish could only thank her for not forcing Hedgewish to explain the story herself, because her mouth was filled with glue. The Centurions bowed their heads, as if in prayer. Perhaps the Empress had exhorted them to it. They intoned together, "Glory be to God." Cook then asked why the Empress had concealed from them identity of Madoka Kaname as God.
Because, treasured Cook, true knowledge of God is not something to announce lightly. Indeed, until but a week ago, there was among the Centurions one whom was not worthy of such enlightenment, DuPage, who blasphemed and sinned as the filthiest scoundrel, whose very ability was anathema to the concept of our true God. But DuPage we hold now in our palm, a ripened fruit, and those who stand before me hath proven themselves just and righteous warriors in God's service. Knowledge of God shall be kept constrained to the worthy, but it is my intention to spread this knowledge. Upon the realization of my plans, we shall appoint Administrator Hedgewish to a post more worthy of her status. We shall appoint her Pontifex, of a new church to be devised, the Church of Madoka Kaname, through which she shall disseminate the knowledge her wish hath granted her. But to speak of such matters now outraces the point.
Pontifex Hedgewish. She imagined herself at the head of a church, delivering a sermon behind a pulpit to pews of gathered magical girls. The Church of Madoka Kaname, a mystery cult. God. God.
Nor shall we delve too deeply into the specifics of how we intend to combat the Puella Magi of Washington. Her power is great enough that she would delete our entire army at a stroke, only those with my blessing can even dare to contest her. As such, we shall hold a private tactical discussion immediately after this meeting with Centurions Cook and Cicero, who shall be instrumental in her defeat.
Pontifex-elect Hedgewish had to wonder how much the Centurions grasped all of this. Cicero in particular seemed woefully ignorant of the meaning of anything. Everything inside Hedgewish crawled and she waited for any of them to speak. Cook had reason, and asked the Empress if she truly planned to visit an elder god of mass destruction on a city of civilians, but nobody spoke. A tiny Sayaka Mickey inside Hedgewish's head stomped her foot on her brain. She gazed skyward, her face coated in a mildewed film of her own sweat, and opened her mouth in the pause in the Empress's voice. She said,
"Your Munificence. If I may, speak." "Readily, Administrator. Thy input is most valued." For the sake of clarity, you intend to destroy the soul gem of DuPage, creating an Archon to attack Washington. That is your plan, yes?
"No," said the Empress.
"No. We plan to create 2 Archons."
"Oh," said Hedgewish.
"As Hedgewish is well aware,"
said the Empress as she strolled back along her carpet with DuPage's soul gem balanced on her palm, showcasing it to her followers,
"wraiths are manifestations of sin. Humanity's evils and vile deeds outpour into these abominable forms known as wraiths, which Puella Magi then purge. An Archon, then, the greatest wraith, forms from the greatest sin. And what, in the eyes of the God who governs this world, would such a sin be?"
Silence. Then a KKKKK, Joliet mustering a nerve.
Abel, betrayal of, no, I mean Judas, in the jaws of Lucifer, innermost ring. Outer bull, Joliet, outer bull. Betrayal indeed, but remember our God's chief concern is Puella Magi, and as such all sin, when committed by us and our ilk, coagulates in all the more fearsome array of wraith. The betrayal of one Puella Magi against another thus intersects this chasm between classical notions of sin and the true notions of our world. Thus, when I shatter DuPage's soul gem, an Archon is sure to arise.
Cicero snapped out of what seemed a trance of contemplation.
"Wait, Your Munificence, you can't sully yourself with sin like that." "We can. We must. It is a burden we must bear, and we alone, and our just recompense for allowing the sins of DuPage to multiply, and to use her blasphemous abilities to our ends. For I, too, hath sinned, I, too."
She paused upon her heel and considered the crystal ball she held, its occluded darkness, lacquered like a magic 8-ball. Aurora, who had remained motionless for so long, flitted her eyes to its surface.
"I shall break it," said Cicero. "She was my comrade and my commander, and it shall be as great a sin if I—" "We shall hear none of it. Hold thy tongue."
The contemplation of the darkened ball ended, she resumed her pace.
"However, we have reason to believe there is yet another way to form an Archon, one more specifically tied to the unique qualities of DuPage's soul gem. For DuPage was able to transmute her despair directly into wraiths. Even now, the despair contained within this soul gem must far exceed the despair a normal Puella Magi's gem may contain, and, once the gem is shattered, where shall that despair go? It is energy, it shall not vanish, only la gem cyclos may defy known thermodynamic principles, so what shall happen to it? This question exceeds the grasp of Administrator Hedwig's knowledge, for it is not of a religious bent, but a purely corporeal. Nonetheless, the late hypotheses of Dr. Cho as well as our own reason indicates that either an archon or a mighty host of wraiths will emerge once this eggshell cracks, either outcome would be to our purposes.
The tiny Sayaka Mickey in her brain kicked and jammed saber after saber into the rivets within the grey matter. She pressed a hand under her nose because she had the distinct impression it had begun to bleed, but it was wet only with snot.
Nonetheless, we shall be able to visit a formidable force upon our adversary, and while she is occupied, we shall take her. Washington shall fall and be ours. That is the crux of our design. We thought it essential to inform thee of it at this juncture.
She ceased speaking. The fire crackled and Joliet fidgeted. Hedwig's vision had blurred.
Your munificence. This action, it'll kill millions of innocent people.
She hesitated, expecting a reproach from Cicero or someone, but nobody stopped her. She added, for finality's sake only, millions of them.
The Washington Puella Magi shall inflict heavy damage to these archons before we defeat her, our forces shall eliminate the rest afterward. The damage to the human populace shall be minimal, and we fully intend to leave the city nigh unmolested. Your munificence, I have,
stomp, stomp, stab, stab.
I have received an emissary. From God. A messenger. She.
The Empress span.
When? At what time? Why was this not immediately reported? She, I apologize your munificence, she informed me that what you intended to do would lead to the deaths of millions. It wasn't a prediction, it was fate. She's God, she can see the future, millions will die because of this. Millions. Millions.
Hedwig said it. She had fucking said it, and finally the stomping stopped, but the ache remained and her skin broke out shivering and slimy rivulets ran down her neck and back. The Empress did not reply immediately. Silence save the crackling hearth reigned for a protracted eternity. The only reason she could still hear was because of this dim silence.
Perhaps, the Empress said, millions must die.
Well, there we fucking go. It's over. It's done. What can Hedwig say to that? What can Hedwig say? If God herself can't warn her away, what can? It had wrenched something thorny from inside her body to even say what she did, to even say anything that might be construed as unpleasant or unwanted in this realm of a vicious cult of personality. What more could she say? What more? What more? She didn't say anything. Because Cicero spoke instead.
Milady, your munificence. Must we, forgive me, allow so many to die for this cause? Yeah, not to, contradict but, surely another way.
Said Cook.
We can defeat the Puella Magi of Washington without resorting to these tactics,
said Cicero.
I know it. Please, your munificence, allow me to contend with her. Cook and I combined ought to suffice.
They were fucking heroes. Hedwig took back every vile thing she ever thought about either. Fucking heroes, 5 months of faffery and ineptitude erased by a single moment of backbone. God, if only she could say the same of herself.
We anticipated some such reception.
The Empress regarded again DuPage's crystal ball.
Indeed, we applaud thy forthrightness, thy bravery, thy rectitude. Yes, thy rectitude, for thou hast stood in defense of God's law over ours. But know that our cause is great. Our cause is monumental. Our cause shall reorient the trajectory of history, human and Puella Magi alike. Our cause shall elevate our species in a way otherwise impossible. Consider this, Puella Magi have existed for millennia. Nay, since the inception of intelligent life upon this terra firma, yet, in all those years, and with all the preternatural boons bestowed upon us and those like us, forever have we languished in squalor, divorced and subjugated under the foot of our keeper, and never in all that time has magic constructed aught but sand castles. Any woman's greatness has swept away in the tide, no permanence achieved. This status is by design. The incubator enjoys and requires our toil, but he requires it because it is something he cannot accomplish himself, and that same fact terrifies him of our prowess. Our God, of whom Hedgewish tells, usurped a single latch of his control with but a wish, and were we all so inclined, to wish for the elevation of our livelihood and the agency over our own lives, what dominion could he maintain upon us? How is it that in so many years, so many wishes, we remain in such a state? It is permanence. Any greatness can be undone with a single death, for we are isolated, weakened, kept frightened, and paranoid of our own kind, encouraged to compete, to view our sisters as foe. Imagining a key, each confirms a prison. And in these prisons we live, and in these prisons we have lived.
She breathed, she stepped up to her mezzanine and replaced DuPage's soul gem upon its pedestal, she swiveled and resumed her march, her arms folded behind her back, a level of intellectual pensiveness etched on her face that contradicted her exalted aura.
Allow us to confess to thee our own wish. We have kept this secret from thee, and we doubt any of thee may suspect it save our timeless friend Cook, but yet if we are to practice our own sermon we must begin by opening our trust to thee, our trusted servants. We must become as sisters, and as such I must reveal to you my most intimate desire, or at least the desire I held as a young female, although I must say now I do not regret my wish in the slightest. For my wish is simple, I wished for immortality. A desire that has eluded mankind since its inception. Since Gilgamesh himself, that initial regnant. It is a wish, I have later come to learn, not so uncommon, and yet for all even this wish is unattainable, as to append permanence in a world that is by necessity and design entropic and ever-shifting requires impossible magic. The incubator bargains with these wishers, appends conditions to everlasting life, ways by which the Puella Magi may indeed die, and only via these conditions can the wish in any semblance be attained. The number and magnitude of conditions varies based on the Magi's potential. My potential, it seems, was great, and so only one condition was attached, and a condition I have complete control over. But we need not speak on that condition now. I have lived 167 years.
Rat bastard lying Wikipedia didn't check its fucking sources it seems, so much for a 37-year-old from Alabama. Hedgewish had to drive her teeth into her lower lip to stop a sudden upsurge of laughter, a mad desire to giggle, melting as she were into the lake of fire that flowed from the hearth, melting like Berwyn's serum and the stomp 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 restarting.
And in those many years we have learned much, and observed the way this world operates, through wars and progressive change, riots and unrest. We have met many Puella Magi and viewed their struggles and watched them die no matter how powerful they seemed, no matter what enchantments their wishes devised for them. There have been those who attempted to band together, those who tried to create fellowships or even civilizations, and yet when the sheer force of personality that welded the several parts together extinguished, those parts dispersed. Always. Why? We have wondered. Why? Non-magical humans have been able to build societies. Nations. They have advanced piecemeal to our contemporary world, unlocked scientific secrets and devised ingenious efforts at legacy. Who among us does not know the name George Washington? The name Charlemagne? The name Imhotep? The incubator tells us many of these advances were aided by Puella Magi, and yet the non-magical survives in writ and the magical dies. Why? Why cannot we, who are greater and more powerful, why cannot we persist as they do? The answer returns always to the incubator. It is his will we remain as we are. He enjoys the increase of humanity, now 7 billion souls strong, for even as they improve their livelihoods their despair remains. But he enjoys we Puella Magi to remain ignorant. He is the enemy. He must be overthrown.
She had talked so much Hedwig wondered if everyone else forgot that the real issue here was the millions of people her stupid scheme was going to kill. She tried to summon annoyance at her long-winded spiel because annoyance would supersede the sickness she felt spreading inside her, annoyance somehow being the most powerful emotion of them all. But the Empress, somehow, continued.
And to overthrow him we must control this planet, for he controls it now. Be assured, we war not against other Puella Magi. We war not against the United States government. We war solely against the incubator, but until we garner enough power we must skirmish against his subjects witting and un.
Another pause, this an askance look at her centurions to revive their existence and prompt them to ask a leading question, how nice of her to remember everyone else. Cicero took the bait.
How are we to fight the incubator, your munificence? He has no end to his bodies. And even if we were to destroy him, it would mean the end of Puella Magi, only he knows how to trade our wishes for our powers. We perhaps cannot kill him,
said the Empress.
Perhaps even with a wish. We have no conception of how his biology operates, and the specimens of his body we collect dissolve into dust, perhaps always were dust. However, it is our belief the incubator can be replaced. Rendered impotent. No longer necessary. With wishes, with magic, can we not usurp him? If he feels the need to subjugate us, does that not itself indicate he can be usurped? Why else would he keep magic a secret from the human population but to sever us from the permanence they have assembled for themselves? Imagine a world, for this is the world I imagine, have imagined, many years, imagine this world. The human government and Puella Magi operate in tandem, open harmony. We are provided resources, lodging, security, society, psychiatric assistance, even improved weaponry for those whose own weapons are not so powerful. In return, we provide services to the boon of humankind, we heal their sick, prevent their disasters, perhaps even if the need arise fight their wars. Do the human governments not already perform this exchange with their terrestrial armies? And are Puella Magi not already even more vital, given the services we perform for their populations without their even knowing? And consider, then, with the Puella Magi of the world organized, aided, provided resources, consider what advancements we could make. Our wishes could unlock new avenues of technological discovery, as the incubator has hinted to us they have already, by his design, done in the past, only now we shall not work under his design, but our own. Could we not perfect the technologies of cloning and interstellar travel? Could we not even replicate the technologies the incubator himself uses, the creation of soul gems and the disposal of grief cubes? Dr. Cho is an example. She was a poor medical student in the United Kingdom, blessed with a wondrous ability but unskilled in combat and verging on death. It is a wonder she survived as long as she did. We rescued her, recruited her to our cause, and put her to work. In safety she conducted research most beneficial to our kind and learned how to hone her magic to create humans with the potential to become Puella Magi. And with the ability of Joliet, we could imbue these humans with memories and desires, nudge them along particular paths, and receive desired outcomes. Although the incubator has recently convinced Dr. Cho to abandon us, how many Puella Magi across the world might have powers similar to hers, or beneficial in some other way? With the Puella Magi of the world unified, with their lives ordered and secure, their material needs accounted for, and the support of the 7 billion unique souls that compose this planet, what can we not accomplish? What futures can we not craft for ourselves? I have dreamed long on this. Long on it, although perhaps not as long as I, granted endless time, ought to have. Nonetheless, this, my friends, is the first step. We must unify this world under our hegemon.
She fell silent with a note of finality, and Hedwig could not shake the feeling she had just been given a spy movie villain speech while strapped to a gurney about to be sawed in half with a laser. But the Empress's eyes twinkled. The more she spoke, the more animated her motions became, until by the end she had started to prance, even skipping on her heels with all her clothes flapping about her, some kind of bleached bird of paradise. And if it weren't for the super ominous "yeah, maybe a few million people need to die for this" that sparked the whole thing, Hedwig might have even agreed with her. Actually, no. She wouldn't. Because she knew the Empress would want this unified, utopian future world to happen under her immortal leadership, and so it would probably be stupid and shitty like the Empire. But Kyubey was stupid and shitty too, and so was Madoka Kaname and her horny angels, so the general idea of magical girls seizing their own fucking destiny in some sense appealed to her. God, but this dumb plan would never work anyway. Sayaka Miki said millions would die, she didn't say they would die and the plan would work and in the end it would all be cool. Would Madoka really step in and intervene herself if the end outcome was overthrowing the incubator? She didn't love the guy herself. But Hedwig had to speak anyway. The stomping never stopped, and the chill inside her had grown, and she felt near to vomiting.
Your Munificence. The incubator, there's a reason why regular humans don't know PMMM Magi exist. It's not because we're great at keeping ourselves hidden. Either he alters human memories so they don't see magic, or maybe humans aren't able to see magic at all.
She kept biting her lip as she spoke, sometimes her tongue.
Juliet's magic shall overcome that, of course.
Of course. Which was why they had said that it was Juliet's survival that would cause this calamity. Because if Juliet died, the Empress would have given up.
But must, Your Munificence, we cause the destruction of so many innocent lives?
Said Cicero, thankfully.
We are indeed sorry to hear that it is foretold so many shall die,
said the Empress.
We did not anticipate our plan to reach such destructive heights. But the formation of the Archons is essential. We cannot hope to defeat the Washington Magi otherwise. Not when she can flatten our forces in a millisecond. The risk is too great.
The doors smashed open. Despite their enormity, they flew off their hinges, impaled by several thin sabers, and immediately everyone except the Empress and the handmaiden transformed. A solitary figure stood in the unnaturally natural light that filtered from the world of sanity. No, two figures, but the second was more distant and smaller. They were Sayaka Miki and, the other one, Cheesehead. Cicero was already charging and Hedwig had to scream,
"Wait, stop, they're the emissaries of God!"
before she even had a chance to wonder how everyone but her could even see them. As soon as Hedwig said it, though, the Empress commanded Cicero to stay her hand and Cicero stopped, although she remained in the center of the room with the carpet mussed beneath her feet. Juliet had pried a painting off the wall, propped it against a shelf like a tent, and hid under it. Hedwig, thankfully unseen given the distraction, flinched into the hearth and vomited on the flames. She immediately felt a lot better, although her head still throbbed.
"You idiot!"
Sayaka Miki screamed, and only when Hedwig turned back wiping her mouth did she realize Sayaka screamed at her.
"Please Sayaka, please,"
said the cheese girl.
"This is a really bad idea. I should have done this myself from the start."
Sayaka slowly approached Cicero, who wielded her halberd upside down so the butt was aimed to strike.
"Miss Empress! Come on, you, move aside, let me look at her at least." "I refuse to yield,"
said Cicero.
"It's not like I can hurt her,"
said Sayaka.
"You heard it, she's immortal. I can't kill her, my partner here can't, nobody can, she can only kill herself. You know, the condition she was talking about? So yeah, you might as well chill out and let me say what I'm gonna say whether you want me to or not.
I refuse to yield, said Cicero.
Geesh. Fine, fine. Then hear this, your little expedition here? This war and all that? Not gonna work. I guarantee it. It'll fall apart totally. Millions will die, yeah, and so will most of the people in this room. By the end of tomorrow, it'll happen.
Hedwig noticed Juliet, under the painting, hurriedly count her fingers up to 7.
Sayaka! You can't say things like that.
The cheese girl lingered in the open doorway.
Warning people when they're gonna die is the surest way to meddle with the way things are supposed to be. That's the plan,
said Sayaka.
Changing things doesn't mean you'll change them better,
said Nagisa.
Things can't get much worse.
She strode almost directly up to Cicero.
So yeah, that's it. Your plan you so long-windedly announced just now? Total failure. Trust me on it. Give up now, go back to Chicago, and you'll all live much better and longer lives.
Cicero stared down at her. Sayaka's words settled in the air. Then the Empress placed a hand to her mouth and laughed, composed and ladylike.
Cicero, please stand aside. You're an emissary of God, are you? What, pray tell, is your name? Sayaka Miki. Pleased to meet ya. Sayaka Miki. Yes, I believe Hedwig mentioned you when she first related the tale of Madoka Kaname. You played some tangential role in her ascension, correct? I dunno about that. I mostly just made things worse.
The Empress shook her head and smiled.
Hedwig, thou art deceived.
She stepped up the 2 steps to the level of her seat and the pedestal of Dupage's gem.
For were this Sayaka Miki truly God's emissary, how is it we can perceive her? Are not the secrets of God restricted to a chosen elect? Oh come on, you're gonna make a point out of that,
said Sayaka. Despite the Empress's order for Cicero to stand aside, she had only shunted somewhat out of the way, so Sayaka had to lean to look at her.
You think we can't make other people see us if we want to? Nagisa and I took human forms again to try and prevent your catastrophe from happening. It's not complicated. We've done it before. I told you this was a bad idea,
said Nagisa.
Shut it. Perhaps that is so,
said the Empress.
Who are we to determine what God can and cannot do? Surely, then, you can show us some token of your divinity? Even in human form, such a thing must be possible.
Sayaka stared at her, gritting her teeth, eyes flitting to Cicero's gaze every so often, and then once to Cook, who had summoned a sphere of water above one hand, but who otherwise did not appear inclined to combat.
Sure,
she said, and drew a blade to point at Cook's sphere.
Look there.
In the sphere of water, like a reflection, although nowhere in the room was there such a thing to reflect, appeared the form of a monstrous mermaid, composed of what looked like collage pieces pasted together, and a heart-shaped crown with a massive sword held aloft. Hedwig recognized it, although she had never actually seen it before. Sayaka clarified before Hedwig had to,
that's the form I took as a witch, in the previous universe, before the law of the cycles existed. Nagisa has a form like that too, if you wanna see it. Speaks she sooth?
The Empress asked Hedwig. Hedwig affirmed as tersely as she could, and even the single word she spoke lingered bitter in her bilious mouth. Cook contorted the form of her sphere, but the reflection remained unchanging.
I can summon her in full, said Sayaka, but then I'd probably do a lot of damage to your room. She's a little big. If you still don't believe me though, we can step outside and I'll put on a show. Your Munificence, I recommend not leaving this room,
said Cicero.
It is quite unneeded, yeah,
said the Empress.
For I believe fully thou hast the capacity to summon such a creature, Sayaka Miki. My only question thus becomes, is such a summoning truly proof of your shard of Godhead?
Sayaka's face contorted.
Seriously? We would of course take a warning from God herself with all due gravity,
said the Empress.
For she is infallible and her knowledge absolute. However, we possess enemies who understand our devotion and who would be all too willing to exploit it. Consider the incubator's resources. Could he not produce a Puella Magi with a likeness similar to Sayaka Miki? Or even, using magic, alter an existing Puella Magi's appearance to such? For in this room stands one with the power to alter appearances, and it can be assured that there are similar ones elsewhere. Perhaps, even, it is the real Sayaka Miki, who died in a past universe but, given new circumstances, survived in this one. Could the incubator not deceive or coerce her to utter this warning in hopes to confound us? Is such a tactic beyond his ken? That's ridiculous. Lila, tell them,
said Sayaka. Hedgewish honestly had no idea how ridiculous it was. It actually made sense. It actually seemed like the dumb kind of stunt the incubator might pull.
As for your supposed witch form, could that not also be a product of magic? We admit that as witches have never existed in this universe, it would be more difficult to replicate the appearance of one. However, Dr. Cho was suspiciously coerced out of our service, and we know well the things she can create. With the incubator's prodding, could not a homunculus be possessed with the will to wish for the ability to manifest witches? Is it even known to you, Hedgewish, whether shards of the law of the cycles given again human form possess such a power?
Hedgewish had to admit it was not known to her. She looked at Sayaka Miki, who looked back livid. Was she the real Sayaka Miki? Hedgewish had to think probably. Honestly, she even still believed it, despite the reasonable doubt the Empress introduced into the whole situation. But somehow Hedgewish no longer gave a shit. It was as if when she vomited she forced out the final dregs of attachment she held to this whole farce of a situation, the incubator and the goddess and the Empress all contending in a panoply of absurdity. The foretold disaster loomed distant again and Hedgewish had to wonder, even if this Sayaka Miki were genuine, she was so incompetent, how much faith could Hedgewish have in her prophecies? This was a bad attitude. She recognized it. Some part of her shouted in some distant corner, maybe the miniature Sayaka who stomped inside her head. This Sayaka Miki was probably real. Her prophecies were probably real. That fact actually kinda made Hedgewish want to see her fail. Cicero, however, gritted her teeth.
Your Munificence, I must admit, I believe I have seen this intruder previously. Only once, and in a passing glimpse during a time I have reason to believe I was under the influence of deceptive magic, but... Oh yeah.
Sayaka smacked her own forehead.
That's right. You showed up in Metakiera. Metakiera, now why would I be hanging out in that city of all places, Miss Empress?
In earlier interviews, Hedgewish had revealed to the Empress that Madoka Kaname hailed from a city called Metakiera in Japan. Cicero probably didn't know the significance, but the Empress must. However, the Empress remained obstinate.
Inconsequential. We have already mentioned it is likely the real Sayaka Miki still lives. Perhaps even this chance meeting between her and Cicero was engendered at the incubator's bidding to confound us now.
It was always going to come back to that. The incubator could engender whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, on whatever timetable he wanted. Sayaka Miki was never going to prove herself. Madoka herself might descend from the heavens with a full choir and a parade of elephants, and the Empress would harden her heart. Anything might be Satan's tricks, after all. Fuck them. Fuck them all. Hedgewish wanted it to end. She hoped over half the people in the room did die tomorrow, and she hoped she was one of them.
You believe this, Lakeisha?
Said Sayaka. Cicero flinched, but the Empress was quick to say.
The incubator of course knows thy given name, Cicero, much as he knows that the condition to our immortality is suicide alone. Be not shaken by such seeming coincidences, for our foe is bountiful in knowledge.
Halfway through the final word, Sayaka Miki sprung into action. She dove low around Cicero and raised a blade to block the butt of Cicero's halberd, which she did although the force blasted her into the wall, which caved like paper. She had already recovered and bounced off as Cicero rushed her. She ducked another strike and rolled over a leg raised to kick, then took off at a sprint so low to the ground she might as well have crawled, the sheet of her cape surrounding and obscuring all but her head as she ran for the Empress's mezzanine. A wall of water rose in front of her that formed into solid sheet ice, but even as Cook manipulated it, the form of Octavia von Seckendorf remained within, and at its widest the witch smashed through and appeared in full corporeality with the sword coming down on Cook. The unseen ceiling ripped off the top and the already damaged wall collapsed in a deluge of rubble. Cicero whipped her halberd around and swung at von Seckendorf, while Hedgewish cleaved close to Aurora, whose spinning yellow ball prevented any debris from crashing against her. Meanwhile Sayaka ascended the steps and cast her cape aside to reveal 5 swords with their tips jabbed into the floor and the pommels outward. The Empress only laughed at her until Sayaka seized the swords and flung them one after another, not at the Empress but at the soul gem of DuPage on its pedestal. The first blade, then the next 4, impaled the crystal ball. It bounced off its perch and struck the ground. Sayaka clenched her fist and shouted something in victory even as Cicero drove von Seckendorf into the ground with a single stroke, and Cook streamed lava water atop it until its orchestral shriek caused Hedgewish to clamp her hands over her ears. The impaled soul gem of DuPage shimmered. It no longer looked like a crystal ball. It wasn't a crystal ball. It was a book, a weighty tome, almost as thick as tall, and shredded parchment collected on the jutting tips of Sayaka's swords. Sayaka's victorious whoop died into confusion as she whipped her head around the room in search of some answer and found it in the palm of the handmaiden, who held the real DuPage soul gem on the far side of the room. Cicero and Cook closed on Sayaka. She backpedaled into a corner and shouted, "None of you have any idea what you'll do," before she swept her cape around herself and vanished. The cape fluttered to the ground, flat. Octavia von Seckendorf melted into water, which flooded the room to knee-height before it began to drain through all the openings the brief fight created. Hedgewish, in Aurora's protective circle, remained dry. The other one, Nagisa, had disappeared at some point too. On the mezzanine, the water did not rise past the Empress's elevated heels. She stooped and seized Sayaka's cape. She flicked it to divest it of water and inspected it with casual interest.
"It should," she said, "be now well understood the ways our enemies seek to undo us." "Are you unharmed, your munificence?"
said Cicero.
"Quite. And our loyal subjects?"
A series of affirmations. Joliet rose from the water, sputtering and spitting. The handmaiden returned to the side of the Empress and handed her the soul gem of DuPage. Hedgewish could only think, so much for Sayaka's "we're not murderers" spiel. Maybe DuPage no longer counted as human.
"I believe,"
said Aurora, the first real words she had spoken the entire time, although her face remained as placid and resolved as always, while everyone turned in anticipation of what she had to say.
"I believe I would be glad to die, for this empire. I do not fear the warnings even if they are true." Thou speak well. Now then, thou art dismissed. As mentioned previously, we shall speak with Cook and Cicero privately as to tactical matters of tomorrow's invasion of Washington. Aurora and Hedgewish, return to your respective platoons. Have all platoons moved to Baltimore, where they will be able to quickly reinforce lest plans go awry.
It was over. It was over. The conversation ended. Hedgewish at least had to be thankful for that. As she kept close to Aurora, whose movements across the room maintained a circle of dryness, the Empress added.
Hedgewish, one final request. Have grief cubes of the quantity of 5,000 be sent to this location as soon as possible. Yes, your munificence.
She and Aurora exited. End of chapter. Chapter end.